Welcome back to Down Under, everyone. Today, we are finally adding the koala to our Australian house. But first, I want to start off with a quick apology for missing last week's episode. I was a tad under the weather, so I took the opportunity to rest and take a break. And I would like to think it was a well-deserved break at that. Now, before we start talking about today's build, I do want to say take a moment, and if you like Australian animals, hit that like button. And if you don't like Australian animals, also hit that like button. So, back to this koala habitat, and how better to start than by using the rock blueprint from CZ Creates. If you remember, you actually might have seen me use this in our last episode as well. You might have also noticed that we're starting a little bit further along than you might be used to when I normally start an episode. This is only part 2 of our Down Under build. A lot of the structural work was completed in part 1, so if you're a bit behind and you want to see more of the building, make sure to check that episode out as well. But today, it's all about the habitat. We started our habitat house with the wombats, we're adding in the koalas now, and looking to the future, expect to see a platypus as well. So with some minor rock work and some cladding pieces placed down to add a little bit more color, our habitat is really starting to take shape. I opted to shake some things up today though, with some quick trees placed, really focusing on smaller trees that will fit indoors because that's key. I started to add in a rather basic climbing structure. For today, it's actually going to be rather simple and nothing too fancy, but it's just one piece of a larger puzzle that will bring the whole thing together in the end. So utilizing a lot of the pre-existing climbing pieces to create some support beams, I began to connect everything together with the thin climbing poles. I will admit, it was looking a little plain though, so in an effort to jazz it up, I actually added in a climbing bridge. It was also at this point I realized that you could adjust the color of this particular piece, and I'm ashamed to admit that. With some final pieces placed, the basic climbing structure is complete. The idea is that this will act as a loop for the koalas, letting them walk up naturally on one side and then leave on the other. Of course, I do know that this is probably not going to work as intended, but I like to think it would look really cool in reality. Next, it was time to move on to foliage. I mixed a bit of the dry pieces with a few of the more lush green items from Australia. I was really trying to create a bit of a contrast to offset the terrain paint and rock work, although I was a bit worried as I was pulling this all together that the build might look a little weird. In fact, when I started, I was placing only green foliage. But with the help of some of the community, I quickly pivoted over to the drier foliage, and it really added to the build. Now, similar to the wombat episode, I'm trying to resist the urge to go crazy with foliage. In a pinch, you can span the foliage to really get a habitat together. And truthfully, there is nothing wrong with that either. But I'm trying to build something new, and I really want to push myself. So pushing back on my natural inclination to place foliage everywhere, I really focused on sightlines and creating something that will look a little bit more fitting to a habitat house. Now, for all the new builders who might have stumbled across this episode, especially with all the new players joining due to the Steam Summer Sale, your first builds may look nothing like you intended. But remember, the more you play and practice, the better you get. Push yourself to always learn and improve. Don't be afraid to take risks and try new things. Sometimes you might be just a little surprised with what you can build. Very much like Down Under. This is pretty far outside of my comfort zone. But look at what's coming together. Of course, I really couldn't have done this without the help of the community though. Speaking of the community, don't forget we have a Discord that is steadily growing. If you want some tips and tricks, or you just want to show off your build, think about joining. New players are always welcome, and we actually have monthly challenges that will come with cool prizes, so you don't want to miss out on those. Now everything is taking shape and things are actually looking up for Cedarbrook Park Zoo, but we aren't stopping with the koala or the platypus. There will also be room for at least one more animal, so take a moment and let me know what Australian animal you would like to see added. And while you're at it, we also need some names for our lovely koalas, so feel free to share below in the comments and upvote your favorite suggestions. Okay, let's get back to our build. Foliage definitely helped out to make this look a tad better, but it's not quite enough to really make it pop, so it's time to start detailing. First, I added in the Australian sunshade. This added a unique shape to the habitat and helps to protect the koalas from sun exposure. I also sneak in a second one later down the road. But sunshades look best when you build them yourself. So I had some fun and I made one. Nothing too fancy though. Some plastic primitive pieces, capped off with some of the conservation boards on the edge. Finally, a quick color change, making it a tad brighter and more inviting, and that's about it. Sadly, it is faster for me to tell you this than it is to actually build it. With the first sunshade placed down and a second one added for good measure, things are really starting to take shape. Next, I took a page out of our entrance and I created a faux Australian house to the side. This will help mask the backstage den as well as our keeper hut. I'm borrowing quite a bit of the pieces we've already built in the first episode, but I changed it up just a little bit. I really liked the way the tin roof looked, and I felt it was more fitting for that rugged Australian look, so I placed 2 down on their own group, letting me adjust it slightly. To help support the roof, I used more of our stained timber pieces, and I made sure to stack them on the roof supports. This helped to add a tad bit of realism to the build, and overall worked out quite well. Now, to make this all look a tad more exciting, I also added a small second floor deck with a barrier. This will all be implied and have no access. But now that I'm thinking about it, it could definitely host some small knickknacks, giving it an added lifelike appearance. Sadly, this might be just about the only portion of our backstage that you will see this episode. If you want to see it all come together though, you can actually check out the livestream VODs from this build. That's right, most of this was built on livestream, so keep an eye out and drop by next time and see me live. Feel free to hang out, chat all things Planet Zoo, and of course, share some feedback live. Things are almost complete. One of the issues I had though was how empty these walls looked. I had tried to adjust the color a bit, but it all looked really bland, so I tried something a little different. I opted to use these Australian animal signs to create a cool looking backdrop to the habitat. It took quite a few of these signs to create one cohesive looking panel, but it really helped to shape everything together. Adding in some additional Australian beams as a lip between the plaster and the signs also worked to help cover any clipping as well. Next, I took the artistic dot design we'd built previously and added it to the wall. I did take even longer and went through even more colors before settling on this final tricolor design. Shout out to the fantastic Mr. Blob who came up with the color selection for me. I feel like we would still be there today trying to figure this out if it wasn't for you. For such a small build, this habitat has really turned out quite well, and with some additional love off-screen to the roof and backstage area, which you will get to see at the very end, don't worry, I think it's safe to say our koala habitat is ready to go. Now, speaking of our backstage area, thank you for Sparrow for the great idea to have an entrance off the ground for the koalas to climb into their off-exhibit dens. She actually brought this up in one of my previous builds for Iguazu, and it was a sad day when I realized that I'd forgotten this one key item. The last thing to really bring this all together though was some additional education signs for the habitat. And nothing fancy. Using Lion Sign Pack, I was able to create quite a few pieces that will help to add a dash of realism to the build, even going as far as to have some window clings for our barrier, something I've never done before. And with this down, our koala habitat is complete. We're about halfway through our overall build, and at this point, I feel like we're flying wild on this build, having fun and throwing any semblance of a plan out the window. But you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way. This building has taken a life of its own, and I'm excited to see it finish. I'm going to leave you here with some final shots of the state of our building, including some roof views as well, which I'm super proud of. As always, thank you to everyone who's helped to build this habitat house. I couldn't have done it without your help. If you like this video and you want to see more of Down Under, make sure to subscribe. Otherwise, and as always, ciao for now.